Good evening and welcome to the July 22nd, 2021 City of Roseville Planning Commission meeting. Pursuant to paragraph 3 of Executive Order N-08-21, executed by the Governor of California on June 11th, 2021, and as a response to mitigating the spread of coronavirus known as COVID-19, the Planning Commission meeting will allow members of the public to participate and address the Planning Commission during the open session of the meeting. Public comment may be submitted by telephone during the meeting and prior to the close of public comment on an agenda item by calling 916-774-5353. If you call, you may be placed on hold until the attendant can answer. The broadcast is delayed by up to 30 seconds when watching at home. When your call is transferred, you will have 3 minutes for public comment on items not on the agenda and 5 minutes in which to speak to a regular agenda item. Your time will be monitored and you'll be informed when you have 1 minute left to conclude your comments. If you're listening to the meeting while calling in, please turn down the volume on the meeting in order to avoid interference. When calling, please do not use the speakerphone option as it may create difficulty for the Planning Commission to hear your comments. I will now call the meeting to order. Lupi, can I please have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Brashears is absent, excused. Commissioner Caparuso? Here. Commissioner Covington is absent, excused. Commissioner Hagen-Jost?
Here.
Commissioner Pryor?
Here.
Vice Chair Martin is absent, excused, and Chair Jensen.
Here. Could you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go to staff introductions, I do want to welcome our new commissioner to our group, Commissioner Cliff Hagen-Jost. I pronounced it correctly.
That's correct.
But welcome to our meeting. With that, Lupi, can we have staff introductions?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. Lupi Nelson, Recording Secretary.
Good evening, Commissioners. Assistant City Attorney Joe Speaker.
Good evening, Chair Jensen and Commissioners. Greg Bitter, Planning Manager.
Good evening, Chair Jensen and Commissioners. Derek Ogden, Senior Planner.
Good evening, Chair Jensen and Commissioners. Kenny Shallow, Associate Planner.
And good evening, Matt Todd, Principal Engineer.
Thank you. And now is the time for public comment. Public comment is the time for anyone who would like to address the Commission on an item that's not on tonight's agenda. Public comment may be given by calling 916-774-5353. When addressing the Commission, please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. If there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak, and I know we have time for folks to call in if they wish to as well. So. So I'm assuming no phone calls, Greg?
We'll give it just a few more seconds, Chair
Okay.
Jensen. Yeah, that's been enough time for the time delay, Chair Jensen. There's no phone calls for public comment.
So no comments. We'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and we'll move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of routine items that may be approved under one motion as recommended in the staff reports. However, each item may be considered separately on a request by the audience, Planning Commission, or staff. To request that a consent item be considered separately, the public may call us again at 916-774-5353. Tonight's consent calendar consists of 3 items. Item 5.1, the minutes from the July 8th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. Item 5.2, North Central Roseville Specific Plan Parcel 49, Lot 7, 1720 Freedom Way, for the record, file PL20-0226. And item 5.3, North Industrial Plan Area Parcel C0-3, Tentative Subdivision Map, 570 Roseville Parkway, file PL21-0070, and that item has been withdrawn by staff. So staff, is there anyone who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar for discussion?
Not in the audience, and we'll give it about 30 seconds, Chair.
Any of the commissioners like to see an item pulled?
Yeah.
This one I would mention.
Yeah.
So I would just call attention to, under the staff report for the minutes, the last bullet point, it reads, there were 1,806 single-family permits issued 7/1/2020 through 6/30/2020. I think that should be 2021.
That's
Can we
correct. That
go
is
ahead and make
correct.
that
Yeah, we'll
correction?
change, yeah. We have no phone calls for public comment on the consent calendar.
Okay, with that, is there a motion from the commission on the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Pryor,
Yes.
Commissioner Hagen-Jost,
Yes.
Commissioner Caparuso,
Yes.
and Chair Jensen.
Yes. Next on the agenda is requests and presentations. Before we begin, I want to review the meeting procedures. First, we'll hear the staff presentation. Then we will take questions from the commission. Then I'll open the public hearing. The applicant will have the opportunity to make a presentation. I will then open public comment, and the public will have an opportunity to speak on the item. We will then close public comment, and the applicant will be given an opportunity to provide a rebuttal if he chooses to do so. Then I will close the public hearing, and the commission may ask questions of staff. Finally, the commission will consider the item and make a decision based on the information provided in the report from staff and the testimony presented during tonight's hearing. As a reminder, again, public comment may be given by calling 916-774-5353. If you call, you may be placed on hold until staff can answer. When addressing the commission, please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 5 minutes. The first presentation we have this evening is item 6.1. It's a request to consider the second addendum to the Creekview Specific Plan EIR. Recommend that the City Council approve the general plan amendment, specific plan amendment, and rezone, and approve the small lot tentative subdivision map, large lot tentative subdivision map modification, and small lot tentative subdivision map modification for 3764 Westbrook Boulevard. For the record, file number PL20-0201. And Kenny, can we have your presentation, please?
Yes, good evening again. I'm here tonight to present the Creekview Amendments project. The project site is located within the Creekview Specific Plan area, which is located in the northwest portion of the city, north of the future extension of Blue Oaks Boulevard and along the future extension of Westbrook Boulevard. The CSP was approved in 2012, and it established the zoning and land use designations for the 501-acre plan area. And with approval of the CSP, large lot and small lot tentative maps were approved, and the city and the applicant also entered into a development agreement to establish development obligations within the plan area. The current project is a request for a general plan and specific plan amendment to transfer residential units, revise acreages, reallocate affordable housing obligations, and to establish modified small lot residential development standards. A rezone is requested to amend the acreages of the zoning designations consistent with the proposed map modifications, and the development agreement will be amended to reflect the revised unit counts, acreages, and affordable housing allocations. A tentative subdivision map is requested for parcels C20 through C22, and lastly, modifications will be made to large lot and small lot tentative subdivision maps. The project will transfer units from MDR parcels C20 and C22 to LDR parcels C1 through C4. Since the unit transfers result in a cumulative change that's greater than 20% for parcel C20, the transfers are being processed as a specific plan amendment. The overall number of residential units for the plan area will remain the same. Staff determined the unit transfers will have no impacts to planned infrastructure, roadways, or public facilities beyond what was anticipated for the area. Other amendments to the specific plan include reallocating the affordable housing obligations. The total allocation will remain the same at 201 units, but the middle income purchase units will be redesignated as low and very low income rental units, and that obligation will be transferred to HDR parcels C40 and C43. The city's housing division determined the proposed transfers are acceptable and consistent with citywide policy. Modifications will be made to the approved large lot maps for the parcels highlighted here. The different colors represent the existing land use designations. A majority of the modifications consist of minor parcel line adjustments to conform the large lots to the small lot maps. This will result in minor changes to the acreages of the parcels, which would require minor revisions to the zoning and land use designations to align them with the new parcel boundaries. The small lot maps for the LDR parcels, which are shown in yellow, will be modified to accommodate the proposed unit transfers and accommodate future housing types. The proposed map modifications are consistent with the design standards of the subdivision ordinance. New subdivisions are proposed on MDR parcels C20 through C22 that will establish a total of 236 single-family lots. At least 2 entrance points will be provided into each subdivision, and all lots are oriented with frontage on the public streets. The subdivisions were found to have adequate street widths for circulation and emergency response. Each subdivision is also consistent with the Paseo design guidelines and the walls and fencing requirements of the CSP, and separate approval of a DERS, a design review for residential subdivision, would be required prior to construction of the homes within these subdivisions. In conclusion, staff finds the proposed unit transfers are consistent with citywide policy, and the project is consistent with the goals, policies, and standards of the zoning ordinance, general plan, and the CSP. Consistent with CEQA, an addendum to the CSP environmental impact report was prepared, and no new significant impacts were found. So at this time, staff recommends the Planning Commission consider the second addendum to the CSP EIR, recommend City Council approve the GPA, SPA, rezone, and development agreement amendment, and adopt the required findings of fact and approve the tentative subdivision map and the large lot and small lot tentative subdivision map modifications subject to the recommended conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kenny. Commissioners, are there any questions of staff at this time? Okay, seeing none at this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and I'd like to invite the representative for this item to come forward and address the commission.
Hi, my name is Brian Moore. I am the project team lead for the Creekview project, and just want to say on behalf of Anthem United, I would like to offer our sincere appreciation for everything the Planning Commission, the City of Roseville, and all the elected officials have done for us along the way. This project has been many, many years in the making, and it's really exciting to be able to actually see some of this come to fruition. The project itself has 5 phases. We are complete with phase 1. We're almost done with phase 2, and we're currently constructing the bridge across Pleasant Grove Creek to get to phases 3, 4, and 5. So lots of activity out there. We've got 3 public home builders out building currently. We've got about 100 houses, give or take, that are either built or under various stages of construction. And we had our first residents move in the month of June. So very exciting, lots of activity. The request here before you today basically sets the stage for the rest of the project. We've got 3 more phases to go. It'll take us another 3.5, 4 years. So if we got any questions or need any more detail, I'm right here. Let's talk about it.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Do any of the commissioners have any questions of the applicant?
No.
Not at the moment.
Okay. With that, I'll go ahead and open the public comment. Public comment may be given by calling 916-774-5353. And as a reminder, you'll have 5 minutes to address the commission on this item. I don't see anyone in the audience, but we'll give it about 30 seconds. Greg?
Yeah. Chair Jensen, there are no phone calls for public comment on this item.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close public comment. Because there was no public comment, I don't see a need to call the applicant back up. Commissioners, are there any other additional questions that you have for this item? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any further discussion, or is there a motion by the commission?
Make a motion, but it'll be a rather long one. I make a motion that we consider the second addendum to the Creekview Specific Plan Environmental Impact Report. Recommend the City Council approve the general plan amendment. I recommend the City Council approve the specific plan amendment. Recommend the City Council adopt the 2 findings of fact and approve the rezone. Recommend the City Council approve the second amendment of the Creekview Development Agreement. Recommend or adopt the 3 findings of fact and approve the small lot tentative subdivision map subject to 86 conditions of approval. Adopt the 3 findings of fact and approve the large lot tentative subdivision map modification subject to 4 conditions of approval, and adopt the 3 findings of fact and approve the small lot tentative subdivision map modification subject to 6 conditions of approval. And that's for item 6.1 and file PL 200201.
Okay, Commissioner Pryor has made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Caparuso has seconded. Lupe, could we please have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Pryor?
Yes.
Commissioner Caparuso?
Yes.
Commissioner Hagen-Joes?
Yes.
And Chair Jensen.
Yes, the motion is approved. There is a 10-day appeal period for this item. Okay, moving on to item 6.2. This is a request to consider the addendum to the 2035 General Plan Environmental Impact Report and recommend that the City Council approve the 2021 housing element for the record file PL20-0178. And Lauren, could we please have your presentation?
Yes, just let me get settled. So good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Lauren Hawker, and I'm here tonight to give you a presentation on the city's 2021 housing element, which is a project we've been working on for about a year now. So before we get into the details of the project, what is a housing element? The housing element is a component of the city's general plan, and according to state law, these are updated on 8-year cycles. The current housing element was adopted in the year 2013, so that means this housing element needs to be updated this year. And the effective period of this updated housing element will be 2021 to 2029. Unlike other elements of the general plan, which are updated pretty much at the sole discretion of the city, the housing element needs to be submitted to, reviewed, and certified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. Now, the foundation of the housing element is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, and the SACOG, Sacramento Area Council of Governments members and jurisdictions. We all received our formal allocation, our RHNA allocation, in March 2020, so March of last year. Our total allocation is 12,066 units, of which 6,178 need to be lower income units. Now, the housing element needs to show capacity for this number of units. This isn't something where we need to build exactly this number of units over the 8-year cycle. So next slide. So what has to be in the housing element? The minimum contents of a housing element are also established in state law, but some of the key things I've identified for you on the slide tonight is it includes an evaluation of past programs. So there is a section that evaluates the 2013 housing element programs and their effectiveness to determine if we needed to make any modifications to those. There's also a housing needs assessment where we look at demographic information and other population characteristics to determine what our community is like and therefore what its housing needs are. Then you also drill down and do the special housing needs evaluation because certain populations may have special needs, like seniors may have housing needs that are different from the general population. And then also there's a fair housing assessment, and this is an equity analysis that looks at housing opportunity and housing choice and determines whether or not there's equitable access to housing and opportunities. As a result of all of that analysis, then you develop your new cycle programs. And then there is also, last but definitely not least, the site's inventory. And this is where you determine whether or not you are meeting your RHNA allocation. This is an evaluation that lists every single site in the city that is vacant and can have capacity for units, or that is underused and has capacity for units, and identifies how many units and at what income level each of those sites can be occupied. So what did our analysis find? So this table is a simplified version showing us what our evaluation found here. And I know you see that number in red, but let's talk about the table overall first. So on your left is income category. I mentioned that you need to meet your total allocation as well as the allocation per income category. So our categories are lower, moderate, and above moderate income as well as our total. But since these are not built units and we don't know how much their rents are and we don't know how much they're selling for, how do you know what the income level is? And the answer is that HCD uses density as a proxy for affordability. So when we're talking about above moderate units, we're talking about your typical single family units at densities of less than 7 units to the acre. At the moderate level, you're talking about compact residential development, so courtyard homes, duplexes, townhomes, and it even starts to get into some apartment homes because we're talking about densities between 7 and 22 units to the acre. Your lower income units are at 23 units to the acre and up, and so are like apartments and condos and that type of development. So the column, your regional housing needs allocation column, shows you how many units we need to accommodate. The city's existing capacity column shows what our site's inventory determined we had in terms of future unbuilt capacity. And then we have our final column that shows whether or not we have more units than we were allocated or if we have fewer units. And you can see that we have surplus in all categories except lower income, in which we have an almost 1,800 unit deficit. Now, why is that? Well, so the first thing to look at is that our allocation of lower income units is more than half of our total allocation. Meanwhile, when we plan our specific plans, we're generally looking for an even split approximately between low density, medium density, and high density units. We aren't typically planning to have more than 50% of a specific plan be apartments, basically. And so what happened here is that our jurisdiction and other jurisdictions across the region, and in fact across the state, got a much higher lower income allocation than we have seen in past cycles. So, when you don't have enough units in your existing capacity, you need a rezone program to get those units. So the rezone program in the housing element is program 14 and includes 4 strategies we'll be pursuing. First is the commercial corridor strategy that'll get us 400 additional units. And this is 3 specific plans over the Atlantic Street, Douglas Harding, and Douglas Sunrise commercial corridors. Next is the infill intensification strategy, and this one would increase the permitted residential density of existing high-density residential sites and sites with multifamily zoning that are in the city's infill area. And we're looking at about 186 units from that strategy. The opportunity site strategy is looking at vacant non-residential sites and converting those to high-density residential sites. We're looking at doing this on a voluntary and willing landowner basis. We can get 600 units off of that strategy. And then finally, there's the vacant site strategy. We would be looking to adopt a land use policy requiring that existing vacant high-density sites have their density increased in sort of the western areas of the city. And that would get us 900 additional units. So our rezone program has the capacity for an additional 2,086 units in it. Key to understand, though, is that no housing projects or land use amendments would be approved just by adoption of the housing element. We're adopting the program that we would then need to implement, and I will be talking about implementing in a moment. Implementation. Stay on that slide for a moment. Thank you. I do want to point out that Exhibit A of your staff report is an addendum to the city's general plan EIR. So although we do still have these subsequent projects to implement this program, there was an environmental impact analysis done of implementing this program with 2,000 some odd units. And we did that for 2 reasons. 1, to streamline the future implementation of this program, and 2, because we wanted to be sure to evaluate all 4 strategies together. And that evaluation found that the impacts of this are within the scope of the general plan EIR. So now we can move on to next steps. So what does this look like now? Well, so the first step will be revising the housing element in response to the feedback we've received on the adoption draft housing element before you tonight. We have given you a packet of comments that we've received, as well as some additional comments we received just in the last 24 hours or so. One of those letters is from the Sacramento Housing Alliance with 3 suggestions for changes, which we've already been discussing with them and think we'll be able to accommodate. We also have comments from residents. One resident was focused on the importance of infill development and felt that the housing element should focus more on providing higher density units in the city's infill area through various means. The infill intensification strategy I discussed does get at some of those items and will promote higher density housing throughout the city's infill area. Now, most of the resident comments use similar language and requested the adoption of a historic preservation ordinance, but that is not really within the scope of a housing element. In addition to this, we spoke with HCD just a few days ago. Their formal June comment letter and our responsive edits were included as attachment 4 to your staff report, and we just received some informal feedback on that. The feedback at this point is pretty minor, and we're confident we can accommodate them. So once we incorporate comments and the feedback, we will publish a final draft of the 2021 housing element, which will then be heard before City Council on August 18th for an adoption hearing. After it is adopted, the housing element is then submitted to HCD for their final review and certification. Now, we have 3 years to implement the Rezone program, but implementation will start pretty much immediately. The first step after adoption is to go through and put together a work program, essentially, and establish the resources that will be needed and timeframes for implementing that Rezone program. So what that really means is there will be stakeholder outreach and public outreach, and they will all be projects that the planning division takes up and that will come back before this body and before City Council for adoption. So that concludes my presentation. And at this time, our recommendation is that you consider the addendum and that you recommend City Council approve the 2021 housing element. And I'm available for any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Lauren, for a very thorough presentation. Commissioners, are there any questions of staff at this time?
I have a question about intensification and your opportunity-based sites.
Sure.
You're saying that you're hopeful that property owners will volunteer to intensify on their sites, and you're hoping to get 600. How do you estimate 600 units on a voluntary basis?
There's a fairly detailed evaluation of this, but we already actually have some property owners that Greg can speak to, some property owners of non-residential property that are interested in converting that to high-density residential. And as we work with folks, we are looking at making sure that at least a portion of that high-density residential that they're looking for is deed-restricted affordable housing. I don't know if Greg wants to speak to that more.
Yeah, I just would like to let you know, Commissioner Pryor, that we've had several inquiries from property owners throughout the city looking at changing the land use on what's currently non-residential land. And as we have been going through this process for the last 2 years, our response to that has been what the city is in need of is land designated and requiring affordable housing, an affordable housing obligation. And so, with the latest federal amendments to the Recovery Act that were passed this last December, there's been some changes to tax credit regulations for affordable housing tax credits, and that has generated more interest from some folks in the development community. A lot of the folks we initially talked to, and we said we really need affordable housing. They weren't that interested. It wasn't that difficult. It was kind of hard to finance. But these recent changes to affordable housing tax credits have made it a little bit more appealing to some of these landowners. So we think that 600 number is a doable number over the next 6 years.
Okay. And the other question I had was you equated affordability with density, and are we assuming that only low-income housing will be high-density housing, and there won't be any less dense housing for low-income?
Yeah, and Patricia can probably speak to this some, but the issue is when it comes to affordable housing, when it comes to lower-income affordable housing, in order to make that work for a developer to build affordable housing that pencils, it really needs to be an apartment-style product. And I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, but...
She said it all.
All right.
Any other questions of the commission?
I have a few, yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Justin.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Appreciate it. I just have a few questions. One of the goal number 1 was edited to incorporate inclusive housing. What exactly is inclusive housing?
Well, there are a lot of ways you can think about it, but one of the key things, speaking as people who have folks in our lives who may need accessibility modifications. So that's one thing. For instance, if showers are roll-in, if door frames are a little wider, that kind of thing. That housing product is inclusive of more individuals, more people in your population can use that housing in that case. So yes, one of our goals is inclusive housing. When we think about residential design review and things like that, we need to be thinking about whether or not that housing is accessible to all of the different members of our community.
And but thinking about it, not requiring it adding it into certain requirements.
I mean, we aren't changing any of our design review standards or anything at this time. That is just a goal that we need to be thinking about.
And then in the document itself, there's a lot of red line.
Yes.
So is this sort of just also like an opportunity to update things? Because, for instance, can you go through and explain, there's a lot of red line on homelessness, a lot of addition on homelessness, a lot of addition on public outreach. Can you kind of touch on those too?
Yeah, I mean, in general, the requirements between last cycle and this cycle on minimum contents have changed quite a bit. So it is essentially a brand new housing element. We had to add a whole lot of data and a whole lot of other backup information. On public outreach, all of it was redlined because that section described the 2013 cycle public outreach. So all of that was redlined out, and then the current cycle public outreach was added to describe what we did this time around. And public outreach is required as part of the housing element, and it should be robust. And I think we did a very good job of contacting stakeholders and other folks and making sure we got input on this housing element.
I think that red line is really good.
Yeah, and then on homelessness, there's also a fair amount of red line there as well, and that was partly in response to some comments we got wanting additional data on homelessness. The previous section just described homelessness very broadly in terms of about how many folks were affected. And now it includes a lot more data on housed versus unhoused and the makeup of and the demographics of homelessness versus the demographics of our general population.
Okay. And then my last question sort of piggybacks on what we were talking about earlier. The third strategy is the one that concerns me, which is the opportunity zones, opportunity sites. And Greg, when you mentioned, you don't think we'd have any challenge getting to that 600 deficit or the 600 goal for that particular strategy, is that within the scope of those developers who've already volunteered? Participate in that strategy?
Yes.
So we can reach that.
So yeah, the folks that have been asking to upzone their properties or rezone their non-residential properties, I think 600 is a doable number. There's probably 3 or 4 sites right now, and if you're looking at between 150 and 200 units per site, there's a hypothetical chance we could exceed that 600 number, which would be good for the city, because it'd be great to end this 3 years with a little bit of a surplus.
Right.
But yeah. So it all has to do with, it's not guaranteed, but because of these recent changes, like I said, to the tax credit legislation, the interest since December has dramatically increased among these developers.
And were all the property owners who were identified as to fall within that, were they notified?
These property owners have reached out to us.
Yeah.
The ones that you're talking about, yeah.
The ones I'm talking about. So one of the things one of the things we've talked to these property owners about is it's in our best interest to help accommodate if they truly are able to pencil out an affordable housing project and need to go through the land use and zoning changes to make that doable, it's in the city's best interest to help accommodate that. So we've been talking to them about helping them, as part of our implementation program, doing the land use and zoning changes as a city-initiated action to take that cost and risk away from these landowners.
Yeah, and I think there's the sites identified as possible potential sites in the program, right? And those were just our first cut, looking at larger sites not within a development agreement, right? And so, no, not all of those sites. Some of those sites we have are the sites that we have interest in, but not all of them. And we've talked to those folks, and so not all of those sites are going to pencil out, but we do think what we were trying to demonstrate is we have enough sites in the city like that, that we're going to be able to get to 600. It may not be those exact 4 sites that we had identified in there.
But I think what concerns me is that if I'm one of those property owners and I'm identified in this housing element, but the city never contacted me.
We talked to everybody. In fact, we've talked to everyone, and
as recently as yesterday.
As recently as yesterday,
one of the owners.
And so the goal of that, of identifying the sites, was again just to show that this is what we have. These are the areas that we could look at this, so that it's not pie in the sky. That we can actually say there are properties where this would work.
Yeah, no, I don't take any issue with the identification of the sites. It would be around the notification to the property owner that they were specifically identified and called out in a report like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to add on to that, I think several of those sites were identified when we did a informational session to City Council last fall. And prior to that informational item at City Council, we talked to all of these property owners.
Okay.
So this isn't just a recent contact. This is nearly a year. And our message was, your property is going to be on a map, but that doesn't mean the city's going to be following up with a land use and zoning change.
That's involuntary. Yeah.
And then this just came to my mind too, because one of the things I think I've learned over the last few months is that this is now going to transition to a real-time truing up, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I just, first of all, I wanted to say, when I was appointed to the commission, I was on a week-long camping trip up in the Donner Mining, and I finished the novel that I was reading during that time. So I want to thank you for providing some additional reading when I got back from Donner. I think my question really touches on what Jason was sort of getting at. Part of this and the redlining and all of that is really an attempt to start an education process for people, stakeholders in the city, to understand the need to address some of the affordable housing issues that are present in the community.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement? Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's really what I wanted to just kind of ask about and point out, that this kind of starts a process that, that we're going to be attending to quite a bit for the next few years.
Yes, that is absolutely true. The housing element is not a one-time thing where we adopt it and then we don't think about it again. There's going to be an implementation phase for the Rezone program, and we will be doing annual reports and reflecting on all of our programs on an ongoing basis. So this is not the first and last time you will be hearing about the housing element.
Thank you. I have just one quick question. It has to do with the implementation time frame.
Yes.
So you have this Rezone program where you've identified all these opportunities we have, and then I heard you mention that we've got 3 years to implement it. So is the expectation that we would get to that 1,700 shortfall in that 3 years?
That is correct.
Okay. And as I looked at it, maybe I have the numbers wrong, the strategy you had got us up to over 2,000 units. So we've got a little bit of float in there if some of these don't come through, but this gets us to a strategy that meets those needs, and the implementation period is the 3-year time frame. And as long as we do that, then we're in a good position with the state that we can continue to move forward and look at the things we need to as the commission.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Okay, if there's no other...
I have a last question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. You were saying earlier on, and I know a lot of folks have written in and said they're worried about it, that the housing element doesn't really concern historic properties and protection. of historic properties, what would be the correct or the best way to address it? Under what form or what plan or what? Is there anything coming up?
Well, I can tell you that the majority of historic properties in Roseville are within the downtown specific plan area. And the downtown specific plan has a chapter or has policies specific to historic preservation and historic buildings. We also have a section of our zoning ordinance that has a list of significant buildings that the council's identified over time with certain protections, certain requirements prior to any of these buildings being demolished. So we have preservation policies and requirements in place. We do not have a formal preservation ordinance or historic preservation program, and that has not been identified as a city council priority in the past, to my knowledge. So we think that the downtown specific plan, the way it paid attention to historic resources, it does its job. So we're not so when you ask what's the a historic preservation program is a large effort. It's an entire new program with a new board, new city resources that need to be allocated towards it, and I think there'd be a lot of overlap with what we already have.
And if I could actually jump in too, I was just going to also clarify, you might recall from the last meeting when I gave a presentation on SB 330, but that SB 330 process, which is the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, it does outline a process which we follow through the application phase with regard to the identification of historic sites and then that designation staying with the property. So there is a little bit of a component of that that's built into the Housing Crisis Act as well, as far as designation and then how that sticks with the particular property for the duration of a project. So that's another component that's built into the existing law for at least identifying and addressing those historic sites.
That's if it's designated already.
Yeah, well, it has to be prior to the project commencing. So, and then that designation stays with it for the duration of the project. So, what it does is eliminates the kind of surprise on the back end of a site as it moves through. So that kind of necessarily requires the inventory or identification of the properties to be able to then designate them as the application comes in, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner Pryor. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing and public comment period. Public comment may be given by calling 916-774-5353. As a reminder, you'll have 5 minutes to address the commission on this item, and so we'll give it some time to see if we get any calls, Greg.
I'll give this item just a little extra time, Chair Jensen, but that's been almost 50 seconds, so we have no public comment on this item.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Commissioners, is there any other discussion, questions, or comments before we look for a motion?
Yeah, I mean, this is not editorializing, we were dealt a challenging hand here, and whether we agree with it necessarily or not, I guess I wanted to really thank staff, Lawrence in particular, for pulling this together, because this is a huge lift, and I know how much work went into it. And so appreciate all of that and the staff resources as well. Thank you.
I just wanted to sort of second that and just say, sort of new eyes looking at all of this coming here, I was deeply impressed with the quality of what you put forward. So thank you.
I also recognize what a challenge this is, and it looks like we're going to be doing it more frequently. It's that since we're doing it annually. So I appreciate your efforts on this. If there's no more discussion, is there a motion from the commission?
I'll move to consider the addendum to 2035.
2035.
2035 General Plan Environmental Impact Report SCH number 2019080418, certified on August 5th, 2020, and recommend the City Council approve the 2021 housing element.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Lupi, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Caparuso?
Yes.
Commissioner Hagan-Jost?
Yes.
Commissioner Pryor?
Yes.
And Chair Jensen.
Yes. The motion is approved. Again, this is a recommendation to the council, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, next on the agenda is board member, commissioner, staff reports. Greg, do we have anything?
I just have a couple quick items. First, I would like to welcome Commissioner Hagan-Jost. I'm glad he's here tonight to help us make a quorum. I appreciate that. And with the housing element on his first meeting. So we're happy to have him aboard. Congratulate Chair Jensen on your first meeting is in the big chair. We're happy. And I'd also want to echo what several of you said. Lauren has done such a tremendous amount of work over the past 6 months getting us to where we're at. Without her and Tricia Isom's efforts, we couldn't be anywhere close to where we are right now. So I just want to say that, I can speak for Mike Isom and myself. We're very appreciative of all the work, and it's been a uphill battle. So we're glad we got here tonight. And then finally, we are going to have a meeting on August 12th. I don't have any, I can't tell you for sure. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a meeting on August 26th, but for sure we have a couple items on the 12th. Those notices just were sent out. And that's all I have for tonight.
Any comments from the commission?
I'm just happy to be here.
Have you? Well, with that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.